if your ideas are going to work for your audience, they need to connect in with your audience. If you don't connect in with your audience, then you've got a problem. Because all over, you can just see your audience separating from you. See your audience becoming more and more distant. And as you stand up there speaking, you notice that fewer and fewer people are paying attention. They're looking at something else. They're doing something else. They got other things in their mind. Anything is more important than your speech. Have you ever had that happen? You ever been giving a speech and actually seen your audience vanish? Maybe PDAs start popping up. And all of a sudden everybody's busy typing away on their computer. And there are these urgent calls they have to take. Or they're just sitting there playing some sort of game and not paying any attention to what you're saying. When this happens, you know you've lost your audience forever. You don't want that to happen. And fortunately, there's some simple things you can keep in mind. There's a simple test you can take before every presentation to make sure that your presentation is going to connect in with your audience. Your audience is going to be involved, intrigued. Test you can take to make sure that everything is going to work out okay in that presentation. And that's a test I call the CSI test. You take the CSI test, you then can become a CSI. And in becoming a CSI, you'll have make sure that your ideas are relevant and interesting and appropriate for that audience. Make sure that your ideas are going to connect in with that audience. 3 simple things you can do to make sure your ideas connect in. Because if your ideas don't connect in, well, you might as well not say anything. You might as well just not even bother to get on stage. Because it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. People are just not going to be involved in what you're saying. Unfortunately, it's simple. It's easy to take tests you can take before every presentation to make sure that you're on track. And once you've taken the CSI test and things work out and you know that your presentation works, your ideas flow, then you get some pretty good benefits. You start noticing your audience connecting in. Start seeing them putting down those PDAs, putting down that cell phone, even closing their laptops because they want to hear what you have to say. You can't force your audience to pay attention to you. Even if you're the CEO and you're giving a speech that everyone's required to attend, you can't force them to really connect in. You have to earn that from your audience. You have to earn that connection. And to make that connection, there are some things that have to be there. And if they aren't there, Disasterville. Problems. But if they are there, if you take the CSI test, you put them in there, then things go better. It flows smoother. People will remember what you say afterwards. You may even repeat it to other people. And that's what it's all about. Making sure that our ideas last. Making sure all the time we take to prepare isn't wasted time. So to make sure that your next presentation isn't just wasted time, take the CSI test before getting on stage. It's simple, it's easy, just a very few steps, and after you've taken it, your idea is passed with flying colors, you'll be ready to present. So come with me as I step you through the CSI test. first thing to do if you want to be CSI is to make sure that your ideas are clear. Your ideas have to be clear. What that means is people have to be able to understand them easily. And sometimes things that seem clear to you don't seem so clear to the audience as a whole. So you might get it. You might say, hey, I understand this. This makes sense. But the audience as a whole doesn't get it. It's not clear. They just don't understand what you're talking about. So always think about not so much, do I understand it, but think, do they understand it? Very important. Recently, a world champion of public speaking put out a program. And the program was all about how you can take videos you shoot at home, put them onto YouTube, which is a place where you can upload and share videos with others, and make money doing that. So you take the video, you then upload it to YouTube to share it with others, and you make money. Now, one thing that you need to know is that putting things onto YouTube is called posting. So when you take things, you upload them onto YouTube, it's called posting. So this world champion of public speaking, Darren LaCroix, got a great idea. I'm going to call my program, I'm going to call my new system, you post it, you profit. With the idea that's saying, you post it, that is, you upload things onto YouTube, and you profit. You get money out of it. You get richer. The program was well received. People bought up the system. Only one problem. Didn't do as well as it could because some people had no clue what posting meant. Had no idea what it meant to post. Those people who were already on YouTube were familiar with posting and were actually trying to figure out ways to get money on YouTube anyway. Those people who weren't putting things on YouTube had no way of understanding what the word posting meant. They didn't use computers that much. They didn't use all that technological stuff. They just stayed away from it. So the problem was that the market that Darren LaCroix was trying to reach, those people who weren't technically oriented, couldn't understand what the name of his system was, what the name of this program was. So it wasn't clear. It seemed clear enough to Darren. He knew what the heck posting meant, but it didn't seem clear enough to people who are actually out there thinking about buying that program, that system. So clear. If you're going to communicate with people, it has to be clear. And in being clear, you have to think about your audience. And just think about it as if I knew nothing about this subject. If I wasn't an expert in it, if I just come in from outside, would I understand it? If I know nothing, would I understand it? Or would I understand it better by the end of the presentation, by the end of the speech? And if the answer is no, you have to be an insider to get it, well, maybe it's not the right speech. Now, sometimes if you've got insider stuff and you're speaking only to insiders, that's okay. If you're only speaking to people who are business people, and they know business buzzwords like uptick and get back to you later and all those business types of things, output and throughput, all that kind of stuff. And okay, maybe that will be clear to your audience. But if you want to reach a broader audience, you want to be clear to everyone. And even if you've got complex business stuff, say it in a clear, easy to understand way that'll broaden your whole audience. So if you want to be a CSI, you have to be clear. The second thing you need to be a CSI is to make sure your ideas are supported. You should have some support to your ideas. That means that your ideas should be something that is more than just saying something. So don't use something like everybody knows, obviously, of course. That doesn't get across an effective idea. Of course, this obviously that everybody knows, well, what if everybody doesn't know? What if it's not so obvious? What if the thing that's of course to you is something different for somebody else? You want to make sure you have supported ideas. And one way to do this is to have an authority. You could say, according to the governmental test done in 2002 across the nation, inflation has gone up at a rate of 2.5%. Now, if that's true, this would be a good supported point. You'd be referring to some sort of test, some sort of study that people know about. And they can look up later. They don't believe you, they can look it up themselves. Find out the facts, find out the figures. So that's one way to support things. And quite often when people think about support, that's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about, well, let's make sure you can trace it back to something or there's a test on it and it's already been done before. Someone has researched it. What if your ideas are original? What if your ideas are based on your own experience, your own understanding? How do you support those ideas? The answer is you make it clear where those ideas came from. You can say, based on my experience over the years of doing this job, I've discovered on this job that there are these certain factors going on. These certain things in the job that I know about and I've learned about. So in this case, support would be you. You're the support. It's your experience. And that's the thing. Always, always recognize your own experience. Just in being alive, for however long you've been alive, you've learned something. And that's important. And as long as you explain to people that this is something you've discovered, you found out on your own, then you're supporting it. There is such a thing as a new idea, an original idea. Or at least there is such a thing as an idea that's new enough that it isn't written down a lot of other places. If that's the case, support is what research you did on it. What original research you did on it. That's another way to support things. Sometimes you find something and you're reading through and you see a bunch of stuff and these names come over and over and over again. And you start to notice a pattern. You say, oh, I get it. Everyone kind of agrees that this is the way things work. These are the steps things work at. People say things different ways, but here's kind of the steps we're talking about. Now, in that case, you don't have just one support you go to. There's a lot of stuff you read about it. So that's okay. Just summarize what you read. Over the many articles that I've read on the subject, over the many years I've studied this, I found people consistently say that, and just make it clear. You're going to have an effective idea, an idea that interests your audience and pulls them in and excites them. You want to make sure that idea is supported. Very important. Always have some form of support. It might be a formal support. It might be something formal, something you've gone through and read and studied. It might be an informal support, something based on your experience, based on something you've come to learn. However it is, if you want to be a CSI, you've got to support your ideas. One really important thing is that they're interesting for you. Got to be interesting for you. So if the idea is interesting to you, you can do something with it. What happens a lot is that people go out there and the idea just isn't interesting to them. They don't care about it. They try to talk about it, but you really don't care about it, it's not going to work. If you're not excited about something, it doesn't interest you, it doesn't get you going, then you can't talk about it. And if you're assigned to talk about something you're not interested in, you'd better figure out how to become interested in it. Because otherwise you just won't do well. You won't research it as hard, you won't look into it, you won't get involved with it. It just won't go that well. So you have to make sure that you've got an interesting idea for you. Interesting to you, gets a hold of you, grabs you, pulls you in. But that's not enough. If all you go up there on stage with is an idea interesting to you, then you're going to be pretty alone out there. Also has to be interesting for your audience. Your audience has to be interested in and thinking about and involved in what you're talking about. So interesting to you, but not to your audience, that's a problem. What you really want to do is you want to make something interesting for you and make it interesting for your audience and just come together. So your interests match your audience interests. It's really what it's all about. Now it doesn't mean if you have something and you're interested in it and the audience maybe has never heard of it before, you figure, oh well, the audience won't be interested in that. It's not the case at all. The challenge is to take what you're interested in and get the audience interested in it. To pull the audience in so they say, wow, I didn't know about that. That's really interesting. I want to find out more about how that works. But you have to get the audience involved. They have to be interested in what you're talking about or you're just going to lose them. All the way through, whatever ideas you come up with, you have to try to relate it back to the audience. You have to say, this is why this matters to you. This is why this is important to you. This is why you need to pay attention. Do all of those things. You want to keep things interesting all the time. All the time while you're up there, you want to keep things interesting so the audience thinks, yeah, this is interesting. I'll pay attention. I'll listen. And what that means, as a speaker, all the time you've got to be thinking, wonder what the audience will be interested in. Wonder what the audience would like. Wonder how I can take this idea and get it and make it so it interests the audience. That's what you have to do all the time. All the time you're out there on stage, get the audience involved, get them interested in your ideas. Now one way to do that is just pick a subject that everybody's interested in. You want to talk about relationships, you want to talk about money, talk about love. Oh, everyone's interested in that stuff. You can get hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people into your presentations. You talk about those things. But if you aren't talking about those things, then you have to convince your audience that it's interesting. You have to somehow get them to understand why this is interesting, why this is important. So without the interest, you can speak all you want, but your speech won't go anywhere. Your audience won't be involved. Always think about how do you keep things interesting? How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it new? That's what it's all about. So the final thing you need to be a CSI is to keep things interesting. And that's the CSI test. That's the test you want to put every idea you have through when you're giving a speech. Because if your ideas pass the CSI test, then your audience can connect in with them. They'll be interested. They'll be involved. Be excited about what you have to say. Your ideas will start to get them. And they'll want to hear more. If you fail the CSI test, don't even give the speech. Just forget about it. Forget about it. Work up something that passes the CSI test, that really works and works well. Pass the CSI test, as you now know, your ideas have to be clear. Really important to have clear ideas. Because if you don't have clear ideas, then the audience is unclear about what's your point, what you're trying to get across, what you're saying. It's all about being clear. And being clear is all about getting people to understand what you're talking about. If you use words that are just way up to here and your audience is here, people are going to get confused. And if your audience is way up here and you're trying to talk here, everybody can understand you. So in general, try to talk here. Even if people are way here, or somewhere beneath that, if you talk in a very clear, understandable way, people will get it. And most importantly, you'll have a broader number of people, a broader amount of people that can get your message, that can understand it. You want to make sure your ideas are supported. Have to be supported. If you're talking about a bunch of stuff and you've never done it, you don't know anybody who's done it, forget it. Not going to happen, not going to be true. If you can give yourself that you've got experience in dealing with this problem, then people will buy in. That's great. Or if you've read a lot about it and you really know it, people then will buy in. You can quote a source and say, according to this source, here's the fact. Then people will say, okay, that idea's got a possibility. It's got a chance. Without it, people will say, forget it. You don't know the facts. And it has to be interesting. And quite often, people forget about that. If you're speaking, it has to be something interesting. If you're interested in it, it should be easy to speak about. It should be interesting to speak about and easy to speak about. If you're really involved with it, if it pulls you in, there's always a chance it's going to pull your audience in. And that's the second part. It has to interest you, sure, but it also has to interest the audience. Both have to be there. So when you come together, you're interested, your audience is interested, everything's fine. And that's really important. Keep it interesting. Keep it fresh, as some people say. Interesting to the audience and interesting to you. So it all comes together. And that is the CSI test. That's the test you want to run all your ideas through. You have to make sure when you're talking that you're going to talk about something that's going to get people interested, involved, excited, or just that they'll know a little bit more than they didn't know before. And maybe they'll be able to do some things after having heard you they couldn't have done before. In presenting, in talking, in sharing information with people, always want to make them richer than they were before. Our goal as speakers is to make people better off, to help improve them. So after they've heard us, they're a little better, a little improved. Some way we've touched their lives. And to make sure those ideas touch their lives, have the effect you want them to have, always put your ideas with the CSI test before presenting.